Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Laura Walker. I'm the Director of IT Service Management Advocacy for StrataCom. We are a Platinum Atlassian partner specialized in ITSM, and we're excited to bring you today a webinar focusing on configuration, sort of a deep dive into configuration around Jira Service Management. So today's webinar, we really put together for our Cherwell customer audience, and it's going to help you compare and contrast what you're familiar with in Cherwell, how you see things, how you do things, and how you might do that in Jira Service Management. We know a lot of folks in the Cherwell world are currently looking for replacement solutions and planning what's going to come next after Cherwell. Our path forward as a partner is Jira Service Management. We think it's one of the greatest ITSM tools out there right now. We've been bringing a lot of our Cherwell customers over. So this webinar is designed to help you understand what would things look like, how would you do things should you choose to move over to Jira Service Management. And some of the topics we'll cover are outlined in our slide here. In case there's anyone on the call unfamiliar with StrataCom, we were founded in 1997, and we've always focused on IT service management engagements in the enterprise space. We partnered with Cherwell for about the last 12 years, but at about a year ago, when there was no path forward with Cherwell, we decided Atlassian would be our path forward. So we're currently a platinum partner in their ecosystem. We've got a large team of consulting staff across the United States that have decades of ITSM experience. It's really our core, what we focus on, what we do best. So with that, I would like to get into the content for today. Our presenter is going to be William Renfro. He's our JSM practice lead. He'll be leading through today's conversation. And I'd like to invite you to ask questions along the way as we're going. You're welcome to use the raise your hand feature, or you can also put questions into the chat feed. I'll ask Bill along the way to take a pause for questions here and there where it makes sense, and we're happy to address those as we go forward. We'll also have plenty of time at the end of today's session for questions you may have as well. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Bill to get going. Whenever you're ready, Bill.
All right, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. It just turned noon here in Wisconsin, so I'm just going to share here and do a little bit of background. So who am I? So I'm one of the partners here at StrataCom. I am our JSM practice lead. I had heavy Cherwell experience. I believe I got trained in Cherwell in 2014 or 2015. Started working on projects then. We did a lot of heavy development. I was a Ivanti/Cherwell community MVP for a couple of years before that all ended. And I've been working in the ITSM/enterprise service management space since 1994, so a very long time. StrataCom was started in 1997, so I've been doing this. I was going to put my picture on there, but then I realized I look like every other 50-year-old guy in IT with glasses, so I didn't bother. So one of the things that I think all of you have done, and where this webinar idea kind of came from is, we all have this confidence in Cherwell. Like, if you ask me to go do this thing, I can go build it and get it done. But we were working with a customer, and their Cherwell admin was needing to be convinced that everything they knew how to build could be done in JSM. And some things work differently, and some things are, the mechanics are just completely different. But we can do all of that. And while Cherwell is certainly a very mature product, and we've worked with it for a long time, we're now, as a company, we've moved into the JSM world heavily. We're moving away from Cherwell since it's end of life, and we've learned a lot, and so we thought we would share some of that. We have about an hour here today, a little bit less now. When I run a demo of JSM, I typically run at least an hour and a half to 2 hours. So we are not going to cover everything today. I am going to look at specific tasks that we did in Cherwell and show you how to do them in JSM. And I'm not going to spend any time actually in Cherwell. I've got some screenshots and stuff, but we're going to go forward from there. Let's just talk about the platform for JSM for a few minutes. Like, one of the biggest differences with Jira Service Management in the cloud is that there are no upgrade cycles. So in JSM, there are micro rollouts all the time when new features come out. You can schedule that, of course, so you're not being surprised by things. But one of the things that we spent so many cycles with in Cherwell was we'd run an upgrade from 10 to 10.1 and then 10.2 and so on and so forth. And we had to do that with a lot of customers, and people spent a lot of time doing that. And that's one of the things that just goes away if you move to JSM. So a lot of our customers have liked that. Everything I'm going to show you today, I'm going to do live. Nothing is scripted. I might regret that. I'm also going to say that on the call with us today is Kim Euchre, one of my coworkers. If you have questions, she may jump in and comment, especially if they're hard, but she has actually more Cherwell experience than I do. She has been in the consulting world as long as I have, maybe a little bit longer. And Kim, just so you know, I unmuted your mic, so you have a hot mic, so you've been warned. That said, it's pollen and allergy season. If there's a weird odd pause, it's probably because I hit mute and needed to clear my throat a little bit. So my apologies for that up front.
Sorry, I had to find my mute button. Hi and welcome. And yes, I have been doing this since 1984. So I've been doing this for a very long time.
All right.
Mostly all in the ITSM space.
Okay, so I have a hate-hate relationship with PowerPoint, so I'm going to try to stay out of this as much as I can. But let's talk about a very simple task in Cherwell. Sometimes you would get a request from a customer, say, hey, can you just move the order of these fields around? Super easy thing to do, right? But process-wise, you had to go through a lot of steps. You had to create a new blueprint, you had to find the right business object, then find the right form, which could be tricky, and then the field on those forms, reorder them, reset the tab order. I saw fields where there's forms, sorry, where there were 45, 50 fields on there. So you had to reset all those for the tab order. If adaptive forms were in the mix, you had to do, all of the forms potentially. And then you had to publish it and test it and move it to prod. And, you could see the screens you'd have to go through here. One of the things I always struggled with in Cherwell was I didn't always know which one of these forms was going to actually be the one that we needed that day. So that got to be a little bit of a stretch too, but then we could reorder it and do whatever. In JSM, things work differently. So I'm going to show you a couple things here real quick. So I have a portal, and if I'm a customer and I need to raise a request, I can go in here and I can see, my form. I've got some stuff on here. And so when we talk in JSM about request types, that's pretty much analogous to a incident subcategory in Cherwell. And that's pretty much analogous to, a specific when we talk about this screen in a form. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So if I want to re-edit the screen or rearrange things on this form, it's actually pretty straightforward. And this is where I said I'm going to do everything live and I may regret it. So I can go look at my request type, right? So I go into my project settings, I look at my request types, I've got a few defined, I've got my Get IT Help one. So I have multiple things on here, but let's say I wanted to rearrange whatever was on here. If I wanted to add a new field on here, I can just literally drag it on the form. If I wanted to rearrange it, I can move it around on here. It's super easy. I save my changes and that's it. If I just go back to my Get IT Help form, it should show up at the top. So there's my asset tag field. Now, let's say that's not the field I want and I want to get rid of it. Literally, I can just drag it off, get rid of it, save it, and it'll go away on the form. So that kind of task, that kind of simple day-to-day admin task in Cherwell that required a whole big process to do, very simple within JSM. So as you can see, maybe though I wanted to add a new field. We know in Cherwell, we'd have to go in again, create a blueprint, go to our group object if we're doing specifics, or maybe go to our instant business object, go ahead, create a new field, put all the information for the field in, et cetera, publish, test. In JSM, the mechanics of that are all a bit different. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to go to my issues. I'll go find my custom fields, and I'm just going to add a field called error code, just a free form text field, nothing complicated. All right, so find our short text. I'll hit next. I'll call this error code, and I can hit create. Now it's going to give me a big long list of places I could potentially add it to, but I don't want to do that right now. I'm just going to hit update. And I'll go back to my project. And by the way, a project is just a shared work area. So I might have a project for HR. I might have a project for IT. I might have a project for facilities. It's just a different way of organizing things. It's somewhat analogous to a major business object in Cherwell, but there's ways that it differs as well. So, but again, it's just a shared work area. And for anyone who has a background with Jira software, this does come out of their old legacy Jira concepts of having a project, which was like an actual project where you started and then finished something. So they've kept some of the terminology just as a FYI. So go back to my project settings. Actually, I don't even have to do that, but click the wrong thing. But we'll go back this way anyway. Go look at my request type, my get IT help. And now you're going to notice I have a few different field areas here, right? But the main part in the center of the screen, I'm going to just add this in here. So search for my field error that I created. I accidentally double clicked it, which drops it into the center section. I was going to drag it, but as you can see, it's now there. If I was to go back to the portal and look at that, it would then be there. So I can actually go ahead and hit this, and we'll see I have my error code field. Any questions in the chat so far? I don't see anything. Yes, whoever said this comment about the upgrade, you are 100% correct. We ran into that many times, the hassle with upgrades. Frankly, as a consulting company, we ran many projects for customers for upgrades because we knew all of the ins and outs of things that could go wrong. And Cherwell and then later Avanti was kind of unique in the fact that they didn't ever do point releases for bug fixes, and a lot of companies do that. So, all right, my hamster brain is getting squirrely, so I gotta go back and see where I was actually going to go. Oh, this slide is basically all the things you don't have to worry about in JSM that could go wrong when you published in Cherwell. So many times I didn't have the right form view, or I wasn't in the right adaptive layout, or the field tabs got messed up. And if you were setting tabs and there was like 50, 60 field or screen elements on the form and you misclicked even one of them, it was start over. You had to get it right, start to finish, and that killed me. And if you overlap two elements sometimes, things wouldn't display. We ran into that many times. Blueprint scans and your conflict list, all that kind of stuff is just no longer something you have to deal with if you were to move to JSM. So that all of those things are huge time savers with us. They're still making it sound like JSM is simple, but the reality is many things are simpler, but there's still quite a few complex things we can do in Cherwell that we can also do in JSM, and we're going to talk about one of them right now. So, as I'm sure all of you remember, service catalog templates were out of the box after version 7 or so in Cherwell, and they were very powerful. You could build, very complex things to onboard somebody, for example, or predefine tasks. One of the downsides was the fact that the automation ran in the foreground. I worked with a government employee as a customer, and we had revised their service catalog templates, but it ran for like 55 seconds because it was a very complex process. It was a very long specific that they had filled out, and we had actually customized it so it was a list of like 25 things, and there was yes/no boxes, so it would conditionally create the tasks. And so that wasn't a great user experience because they would have to sit there. And now in JSM, almost all of the automations run in the background. And let's take a look at what that means and how it works. So I'm going to go back here. I'm in my help center, my portal as a customer. I'll go to the service desk. As you can see, when we come in here, we've got some common knowledge stickied to try to do some call avoidance. But when we need to raise a request, I can go in here. And let's say, for whatever reason, my legal name has changed. And now all of the assets I own are in my old name, and I need to get that updated for, just good process reasons. So I've created this, got my description of what's going on. I'll just say update my info. Kim, will you please keep an eye on the chat too? So this gives me a couple things that maybe match, a couple knowledge articles, do some more call avoidance, and then I have a form I need to fill out. We're going to look at these forms here a little bit more in a bit, but as you can see, I did this testing it. I'll just say I had a legal name change, right? And of course, there's many reasons people's names could change, but this is just an example. And I'll send this in. Now, what's happening on the back end right now is there's an automation process that's looking for this specific kind of request and then creating tasks for that request. So if I go look at this in an agent view, you'll see it's now taken a look at this request and it's created some subtasks that are associated to this request. And so now I can assign these subtasks. Every one of these subtasks is an individual issue. I can assign it to a team or a person, get all this information updated. I can prevent this parent task from closing until the subtasks are done, much like you could with tasks and dependencies within Cherwell. And it was very easy for me to set this up. And now all the admins out there are going, great, tell me how it works. And I'm going to tell you that right now. So over here on the bottom, scroll way down, I can see automations. I can see recent rule runs. And because this list is limited, a bunch of different things. So a bunch of different things were checked. Not all these necessarily ran. But I happen to know that it's this one. So we're going to go look at on create. If we just scroll top to bottom real quick, you can see this is really short. It doesn't do a lot. So let's talk about what it is doing. So it's saying when the issue is created, okay, then look up objects from the service catalog. We've got our code in here telling it what to look up. And so what it's actually saying here is whether, and in fact, I was debugging this earlier and I should have taken the debug code out, but since it's in there, I'll leave it and explain it. We can put some debugger on it that just throws values in an audit log and saying, go find the request type in the service catalog, and then take a look and look up if there's tasks associated with the request. And we'll show you this in a second. And if there are, create those tasks. And now this works for every request type. I don't necessarily have to have something defined for each request type, but if I do, it'll create those tasks. Every product has a, thing I don't like the terminology of. And one that I don't like the terminology of in JSM is this assets. What this really should be called is reference data. It includes the CMDB and all assets, but it also includes our lookup data, right? So I've got my service catalog. You saw that in the query. I don't have much in here right now. I only created this just for this demonstration. You can see I've got my request type schema and I've got a task schema that's analogous to a lookup table. In my task schema, I've got some predefined tasks. And in my request, if I go look at this, I have tasks associated with this. So once I create tasks, I can just very easily go ahead and, add them, remove them. And that automation process that I showed you goes through here. So all I need to do, if I add a new request type with tasks, is come in here and add a couple data records for the lookup and then associate the tasks to them. It's very, very simple and very straightforward. The learning curve in JSM, it follows the 80-20 rule pretty closely. These smart values, which are what these are called, the shorthand, is pretty much the worst part of it. The good news is there's lots of reference and documentation, and this is no different than nested expressions in Cherwell that could get very complex. So this kind of thing is one of the more complex things you would do, but again, 80% of what you would do is very straightforward.
Bill?
Yeah.
May I show you a little fun thing for this activity? Will you go click on the little smart value icon to the right?
That one?
Yep. Oh, look at that. There's click links to a lot of your smart values right there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying that, that's
Yes.
a very, very quick way of you getting to a smart value that is a predefined one.
Yes, and that's also very nice. And let's talk about troubleshooting for a minute. I did something stupid last night, right? So if I go look at the audit log here and I look at this, well, you can see I had some problems with this, right? And I ran through a few iterations and testing, but I was able to test it very quickly. Unlike in Cherwell, where I had to go and look at possibly some logging, or I might have had to change something, publish a blueprint, wait for all that to process. Sometimes automations didn't always get picked up. In here, I can change how things work pretty easily. So this is my trigger. This is what causes this to fire. These can be complex, they can be simple, but I can get rid of the trigger, and I can go to manual, and I didn't actually select it, sorry. Again, when I said I was going to do all this live, I may regret it eventually. And now as me testing this, I can just run the same thing again. So I'll put in a service request, search for name change. I'll put in my name change. It's got all this information. I'm just going to skip everything I don't have to here because I just want to test the automation. All right. So I'll go view my issue. And now you'll see over here, I've got my automation. I can just run it from here and saying my automation is in process. If it was to fail or I was to have any kind of issue with it, I refresh my screen now, I should have my subtest. So it didn't fail. But again, I could just go down here to my automations, take a look at this in a new tab, look at my audit log. And you remember I had the debug information in there? The debug information shows me the exact value being passed. And it can see it created these related issues. So the ability to quickly change the trigger and run it manually, huge time saver for troubleshooting. So I can just change it back really easily and do an update. Okay, so it's 12:25. I've gotten through a bit of this. We talked about, so again, just to summarize, it's very much a better user experience. Everything happens on the background. It runs fast, and we'll keep going from there. So slide 12. Let's talk about portal changes. The portal in JSM and the portals in Cherwell, two completely different animals. I wouldn't even compare them. In Cherwell, portals were, for the most part, dashboards that were being edited. Sometimes they then called business objects in like create or edit mode, and you would go into that, and then they would bring you back to a dashboard. There's none of that messing around kind of stuff in JSM. So I am an administrator. If I go to my portal, now I am an admin, as I said. Let's look at a couple things here in the portal. If I go to the top level help center, you can see I have access to multiple projects. I also have something up here, this useful links. I can take a look at current major incidents. This is actually an embedded Confluence page. I have not talked about Confluence at all, but it's included with JSM. It is a knowledge base. It allows you to create articles. It's got a much better editor than the one in JSM, or I'm sorry, than in Cherwell. But more importantly, it can be used in many multiple different ways like this. It can go back and reference things and put these in. Granted, in Cherwell, you could create a dashboard widget to do the same thing. Things just work differently here. Let's go back to the Help Center and talk about customization. So maybe I have 5 projects visible to my customers out there, but I don't really want them to see all these. I don't want them to see operations or facilities or engineering support. Those are more internal functions. I can go in here, I can do edit my homepage layout, and we can just move these out of here, right? So then now they're down on this bottom, but you can see they're not really hidden yet. They're just on the top section, but I could just hide them completely. So it's engineering, that's the other one. So now these are hidden from the customers. They can't really see them. They'll just see these top 2. So that's a very easy part of the layout. I can also drag these around if I want them in a different order. So the layout publishing, very straightforward and easy. We do have other options as well. So if I go back in here to customize, I can add a login message. So that shows up the first time a person logs back in. That's the other thing, is you don't really ever log into JSM except for the very, very first time you put in your email address. Everything is single sign-on and it works really well. But I can also do announcements. And as you can see, I have an announcement over here. So server maintenance, do not report outages, pretty straightforward. All of my admins can change this. All the permission models, by the way, are configurable in the same way that they are in Cherwell. You can configure very, very specific permissions, assign those to groups/roles, and then go from there. The out-of-the-box ones are pretty good, though. We also have some look and feel things we can do. We can add logos, we can change colors and layouts. Honestly, it's pretty straightforward. It's simple. If you want a more complex looking portal, there are many add-ons in the Atlassian marketplace. Some people have specific uses, but I really like how simple the portal is personally. Let's see if I had anything else on that slide I want to remember. Yes, we can leverage additional tools. We've actually had a couple customers that actually build their main portal in Confluence, publish it as a web page, and then link back to the Help Center. So there are quite a few options out there of how we can do things and how we can lay them out. I'm just going to check the chat because I haven't checked it for a couple minutes.
Been anything?
All right. So to summarize that, again, to make changes in JSM, really straightforward, a little bit less complicated than in Cherwell. Now let's talk about forms versus specifics. So a form in Cherwell is always what you see at the presentation layer, right? Or it could be a grid or a dashboard. But usually if you're talking about messing with records and data, you're looking at a form. If you're creating a new incident or a change or whatever, you're in a form. And typically for any form, let me start that over. Typically, every instance subcategory in Cherwell had one specific associated with it. And to create that specific was a whole process. You had to go in and create a new member of the group object and a new blueprint and create a new screen and a new grid and so on and so forth and test and publish. And we all knew that process really well because I'm sure we all did it a zillion times. But in Cherwell, it was always just forms. In JSM, we have forms and screens. And let's take a look at the difference between those two. So I am a help desk tech. I am in here looking at my tickets. This is a major incident. You may remember seeing this in the portal of current major incidents that I put out there. What I'm looking at right now is a screen. It is a list of fields. The layout and form editor don't exist here. You may remember if I went back and I was to configure this, I can drag and drop fields onto here. I can move them around. It all auto sizes based on the device you're on. But a screen is just a list of fields that exist in the system. A form is something different entirely. So let's go back to what we looked at earlier, or get IT help. I didn't actually fill this out earlier. Had my error code field I put on here. But this we're looking at right now is a form on the back end, and we'll go take a look at that in a minute. One of the things that was always difficult to work with inside Cherwell's form editor was the lack of dynamic show and hide. So you notice when I pick something here, I'm going to pick my device, so I'll pick that, and now I got different options, and the screen grew. So there it's back, and I'll say what device, I'll say desktop. This is a Atlassian demo environment there. You have a pretty good sense of humor. So I put my asset tag in and I can summarize this. If I had chosen something different, right? Say system access, did I forget my password? If I choose different options, I'm shown different things in here and I can choose them. And now you'll notice that because it can't work, they're going to expedite this. So I'll submit this. And as a customer, I will see updates on this, et cetera, they'll come through email. But how does that form work? We're going to go back and take a look. So these are essentially the admin options, and we're only touching on a handful of them today. But editing most things happens in here. And because projects are separate, like I have my HR project and my IT project, all of that stuff can be different between these. And you'll notice, so here I'm in forms, I'll go to get IT help. And this form editor is really, really nice. So you'll see the attached form here. I'm going to go ahead and edit the form. So as I scroll down, you can see all of the possible items that were displayed on the screen. And you'll see right away, my first thing is what are you having trouble with? And I've got a static list here. This, of course, could be linked back to a lookup table, just like in Cherwell. But then I have my sections. And sections can display conditionally. So this is saying only display this section if I chose laptop, phone, printer, / the things under my device. And then it gives me, a couple different questions. And then it's saying only display this section if you have laptop or desktop, and so on and so forth. So it's really nice to work in an editor where you can show and hide things. And to give it a really good working example, I just recently finished a project with an international company, mostly located in the United States, but also in Slovakia and Germany. in all three of those countries, they had people speaking all three languages. So the very first question at the top of this form is, what language do you want to see this form in? So you could choose any of the three. It would then display the form and then do additional things beyond that. So the only limit, yeah.
I have a question after you're done. Go ahead.
So the only limitation on these conditional things is it can't be conditional on a free-form data field. It just has to be conditional on something you've selected. Go ahead.
Doug asks, is it possible to quickly show how that field that you referenced can be linked back to a lookup table?
Which one was that?
I'm not sure. That's why I'm asking. The first dropdown that you had on the form.
Sure. Let's do that a slightly different way, though. I'm just going to add a new field. And I'm going to add an assets object. You may remember that. All right, so I've just added a field that exists already called Office, right? And this is going to give me a drop down, save my changes so we can look at the form. So this predefined field called Office, which I didn't actually change the label on, I should have done that, is going to be looking at, so if I go into, so in theory, if I go here and look at the Get IT Help Now, Office has, I don't know why it's not showing things, but that's kind of how we would troubleshoot this anyway, right? So back in my custom fields that we talked about earlier, this predefined field called Office is in here somewhere. There it is. You can see it's an assets object field, and I want to edit the context and default values. And the context is basically how is it looking up things, right? And if I edit this, it's looking at my facilities schema back in assets. It's looking at Office, and this custom field is another way of referencing things that I'm not sure what this particular field is doing. And then it's just saying down here what to display. What I do know is that if I remove this region equals, that it's probably matching on who I am, and I save these changes, I've now expanded the scope of what that person is doing. So if I refresh this, I would expect I would actually see some information in here now. Yes. So now it's looking at all of the offices. And specifically, right, it was looking at facilities and then it was looking at offices. So in here somewhere is offices. Here we go. There's all the offices. So it's using this container just to reference, and then we're embedding that thing into the form. And this is something we do often. Again, I hate the label that this is called. I don't know that I have a better term for it yet, but that's just how it is. So yeah, as you can see in here, we do have actual asset data as well. So there's, this is a model up here, the hardware catalog, and then we've got various assets in here. In the real world, these probably come in from scanning like SCCM or Intune or whatever, but kind of going way off topic. So let's talk about, we were back here, we were talking about forms and specifics. And if you remember, the specifics were always like tall and skinny and kind of hard to use. And you were always starting from scratch. Sometimes you could copy all the fields off one specifics form and paste them on another, but that was rare. Let's say I want to create a new request type and a new form in JSM, right? How would I do that? Well, I would go to my projects. I go to the one I'm actually already in this one, but I'll go back to project settings. So first of all, I want to make a new form. What kind of form do I want to make? Well, let's say I want to onboard some people and I want to have an IT checklist of the things they're supposed to do. I could create a form from scratch, but that sounds boring. One of the things that Atlassian has added to over and over and over again as I've been working in it for the last year are their templates. And there are templates for a whole bunch of things. Forms are one of them. So let's go take a look at the templates. When I first started working in here, so there's 217 right now. There were 40 some, maybe 50 some when I first started. So they've quadrupled the number of templates out there. So we'll go look at the IT templates, and what do we have? Well, here's an onboarding checklist. Let's take a look at that. So we've got, looks like some pretty good information in here. Probably this is a good enough starting point for me. So I'll go ahead and I'll just save this changes and I'll put this form into my list of forms. And there it is. But you may recall, I also said we need a request type with this, right? So we'll go back to our settings. We'll create a new request here, called employee onboarding. And once again, I have templates. So I've got an onboard employee template. Let's take a look at it. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Go ahead and hit add. Forgot you have to choose the portal group it'll go into. So when we are in the service desk, I know I'm jumping around a little bit here. These are our portal groups. They're just arbitrary groupings of issues. So go back to this, and I'll just put this in common request because we onboard people fairly often, and then we'll make it a service request. I'll go ahead and hit add. And now I haven't wired my form to this, but I'll do that now. So I had my form I just created, do my onboarding checklist, and now it's just associated with it. And then there's one more setting we can look at, one more set of settings. You see it isn't quite completely wired up to the request type here yet. I go to my settings back here in the form, and I attach it to your request type here. Apparently I've got multiples of those in there. It'll now show up there automatically in the portal. And I can make it so it's editable after the fact or not. And I can force it to attach a PDF of this form to the ticket when it's submitted. So now if I save these changes, and since nothing has gone wrong yet doing things live, I'm a little bit hesitant to go there at this point, but we'll go take a look at this. Go back to the portal and go to common requests, do onboard a new employee. So now in the space of 5 minutes, I did what would have been a half a day in Cherwell, creating a new form, creating new specifics, a new grid, new incident category, updating the group map and or the information in the subcategory table, and publishing it. Now, is this 100%? Of course not. We would need to probably customize this to match our business processes and whatever, but it gives you a huge running start on things. And now there's something else you can do in JSM that you cannot do in Cherwell. So let's go take this from the agent side. I get a call from whoever saying, hey, I want to onboard some people. We'll say it's Mitch. It's called me. And by the way, you'll notice they try to keep the creation of the ticket very simple. So we got a new person, minimal stuff to fill out in this view, and I'll just go ahead and create the issue. And go take a look at it. And we've got a more complex version of this, but there's no form, right? How's the person supposed to fill out the form? Well, I can just add one as an agent. So I'll go find my employee onboarding IT checklist, and I'll hit add. And because we want somebody to fill it out in the portal, I actually have to do one more step and make it external. So we can control if it's an internal or viewable to the customer. But we also had a name change, right? So I can add multiple forms if I wanted to this ticket. Again, I'll make it external so it can be edited in the portal. There's no limit to how many of these forms I can add. And it is really nice for when you have complex things that come in and you want to have customers fill out more than one thing. So go ahead.
Through an automation, if an agent did use the agent side rather than the portal, you can automatically assign those forms through an automation to be attached and even made external. So if you have this form is always required for this type, I can bring that in automatically.
True enough. So we are getting short on time here, and I want to leave some time for questions. So I'm going to show you one more thing. Now, anybody who's working in any kind of enterprise situation has probably wagged their finger at me already saying, you're making all these changes live in a production system. That is not cool. And yes, I would expect to get yelled at. I've worked with customers where we under SOX audit controls and doing things without change approval and stuff was bad. I'm just going to close a couple extra tabs because I've gone through a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. So if I go back to my presentation here, we're just going to look at my very last slide. So in Cherwell, you generally had a test and a prod system. Some people had more than that. There could have been QA. It was not uncommon to have 3 environments. And typically it was in the cloud, typically 2 completely different systems. This is one of the things where JSM is just inherently different. If you have premium or enterprise, and quite frankly, we're only really talking to customers who would want premium or enterprise, because people who are on standard are probably a 5 to 6 person help desk operation and are typically not going to be working in these bigger environments. Built into the system is a sandbox. So you can see here, this is my demo environment. I'm going to go to our actual work one. This is our internal. And you can see I'm in here. And just take a look at how this looks. If I go back here, this is my sandbox. By the way, this is signing me in. It's taking a look at the single sign-on stuff because I haven't been in here for a while, apparently. And you can see now, it says right here, StrataCom Sandbox, 448, et cetera, et cetera. If you are a premium customer, you get one sandbox to work in. If you are an enterprise customer, you can not only have multiple sandboxes, you can have multiple sites. So as you can see, my real site here, StrataCom.Inc.Atlassian.net, with some of our enterprise customers, we've had like dev-StrataCom.Inc.Atlassian.net. But again, in this sandbox, I can go in and I can create automations and test them, export them, bring them into my production system. I can export request types, I can export forms and all kinds of stuff. And so that process, the true development process of having it under control, doing change management, et cetera, is manageable in JSM as well. So, all right, I have talked for about 45 minutes and I talk a lot all the time. I'm going to stop and let's go to questions, or if we don't have questions, I don't know, Kim, if you have comments on anything else you want to talk about. Okay, so
I think it went great.
Okay. And if you have any other things you want me to take a look at in here, please let me know. But also afterwards, feel free to email me, feel free to email Laura, Kim, whatever. If you want a full-blown demo of JSM to see it start to finish, we can do that. If you want, just whatever you need, let us know. Any other questions out there? Okay, I'm not seeing any right this second. I'll stay on until more or less everyone is gone, but I do want to thank you all for your time today. I know we're busy. I don't know about you, but school just got out here this week and people are bouncing off the walls. We're leaving in 2 hours to go do a family thing. And so I know everyone's busy, and thank you for coming and watching, and I appreciate it. Laura, do you have any final comments? Or Jack?
Hopefully you see the slideshow here, some contact information if you're looking to get in touch with StrataCom. We're also happy to schedule a customized demo of Jira Service Management. So if you're just trying to figure out what you're going to place with Cherwell, let us know. Happy to help you in that journey and provide a demo if you're interested. All right, with that, I don't see any other questions rolling in, so I think it's safe to conclude. We'll be happy to share out this presentation recording. Feel free to rewatch, share with your team, so forth. And we've got an interesting demonstration on Verima software coming up in a webinar next week, so watch for emails coming from our team if that's something of interest to you, especially software license management. It's a key point that they do really well, so we'd love to have you join us for that webinar. And thanks for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.